Hi, 7th graders. We're on lesson 7-6, which is percent of change. So label the top of your page. Our learning target is finding the percent of increase or decrease. And this lesson starts on page 369 in your textbook. So if a baseball player hit 20 home runs last year and 25 home runs this year, how did his home run production change? Well, he went from 20 to 25, so we know that he increased, and he increased by 5 home runs. If a football player rushed 83 yards per game last year and 60 yards per game this year, how did his yardage change? Well, he went from 83 to 60, so he decreased, and he decreased by 23 yards. So when we talk about the percent of change, we're comparing the change in quantity to the original amount. So the baseball players and the football players, they had two different quantities that changed. We just figured out the difference, but we're going to talk about the percent of change. So percent of increase, which it means that the amount goes up, and the percent of decrease means that the amount goes down. So this is something that you would want to write into your notebook. This is an important vocabulary word to know. And again, a percent of change is a ratio that compares the change in quantity to the original amount. So percent of change, this is something that you want to write right here, equals the amount of change over the original amount. So the percent of change is based on the original amount. If the original quantity increases, it's called percent of increase, and if it decreased, then it's called percent of decrease, which obviously makes sense. So percent of increase is the amount of increase over the original amount. So you're going to take the new minus the original. So I would write both of these down in your notebook, and I would write this in parentheses right next to the amount of increase. And then percent of decrease equals the amount of decrease over the original amount, and I would write original minus new in parentheses right next to amount of decrease. So our first step is to write out our ratio, and then our second step is to convert it to a percent. So add that, have your first step and second step. So what does all of this mean? Yusuf bought a DVD recorder for $280. Now it is on sale for $220. Find the percent of change in the price. Round to the nearest whole. So the new price, so it starts with 280. The new price is 220. Because it's less than the original price, this is a percent of decrease. It goes down. So the amount of decrease, we take 280 and we subtract 220 and we get $60. So we take $60 and we put it into a ratio over the original amount. $60 over 280, which is approximately 0.21 or 21 hundredths. And then remember the second step is to convert it to a percent. So we get approximately 21%. Okay, if we want to find the percent of change from 10 yards to 13 yards, we're going from 10 to 13, so this is a percent of increase. We find the amount of change, so we take 13 minus 10, and then we have our denominator be the original amount which is 10. So then we have 3/10, which is 0.3. And then we convert it to a percent, so we have to move the decimal over 2 and add that 0. So 0.3 is the same as 30%. So a 30% increase is what we would say. Find the percent of change in the cost of gasoline from 1970 to 2007. So we have $1.30 in 1970 and $2.85 in 2007. So 2007, the price is greater than the price in 1970. So this is again a percent of increase. So we take $2.85 minus $1.30 and we get $1.55. We take $1.55 and we put it on top of the original amount, which is $1.30. Remember, the original is whichever one we start with, whichever amount we begin with or start with. And then we simplify. $1.55 divided by 130 is 1.19, and then we convert it to a percent, 119%. Find the percent of change from $20 to $15. So this is a percent of decrease. So 20 minus 15 is 5. Our original amount is 20. So very important that we have the original amount on the bottom. And then 5/20 can actually be simplified to 1/4. Which we know the decimal for 1/4 is 0.25, and then we change that to 25%. So step 1, we write out our equation, and then step 2, remember, we change it to a percent. Always percent, 25%, and then because we went down, it's 25% decrease. So that is all I have. So make sure you log into NICU and take your 7-6 NICU quiz. Have a super evening.